we are getting joined by one of the hottest soccer writers in Canada right now, and I mean this because he was tweeted by Craig Forrest about his articles. Alexandre Gangué-Ruzic joins the show today. Alex, welcome to the team.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's a pleasure to hop on, chat Canadian soccer. Great bit of momentum, really, for the national team right now. The national team is on fire. I'm just pleased to be able to play a part in that, just watching the games, covering the games. And I mean, yeah, with the run of form they're in, it feels like they're going to touch the moon soon enough. So it's going to be a pleasure.
I want to get into the soccer conversation, but I do have to ask, as a longtime Canada fan, how cool was it to have people shouting you out like Craig Forrest this last week?
I mean, it was pretty surreal. I mean, a guy like Craig Forrest, I didn't really get to watch him play much growing up. I think he just retired kind of when I was a bit too young to really say I've watched him. Obviously, I've seen back the highlights. He was obviously your goalie when Canada won the Gold Cup for the first and only time. So that was obviously pretty cool. But I grew up watching him on Sportsnet back in the day, watching him on the Premier League coverage. So it is pretty cool to see guys like Craig Forrest. I mean, he's a pretty down earth guy. You see him on Twitter there, always just interacting with people. He seems like an awesome guy, and it was yeah quite the moment, because it's one of those guys that you grow up seeing on TV, and then he's just seems like such a humble guy, which is pretty cool.
Sure. Let's get into the soccer conversation. Canada has a huge window here. El Salvador, Honduras, USA come away with 9 points. How impressive was this run for them?
It was massive, and I mean, I don't think anyone saw it coming. That's the biggest thing. I think heading into this window, you kind of, pre at the end of the November window, you won 2 games. You're kind of riding a momentum. You go into January, you look 2 tough away games, tough home game. You kind of thought, okay, maybe best case scenario, you get 6 points. You're on it. You're in great position heading into the last window. Then you find out Alphonso Davies is going to be out for the window. Then your expectations lower just a tad. You're losing, Canada's losing their best player. How are they going to cope? Okay, maybe a 5-point window, maybe even a 4-point window is more realistic in the eyes of some. And then the news kept on piling up. You lose a guy like Stefan Eustáquio for at least the first game or two. You're starting to look at the roster. You're wondering, okay, there's a tough trip to Honduras. You have to play a full strength U.S. team at home, and then you have to go to a plucky El Salvador. It just felt like anything above 5 or 6 points would have been seen as a bonus in this. And then they just go out and they get the job done 3 times in a row, 2-0 wins. Not just that, it wasn't the case of them sitting back and just getting lucky in all 3 games, because it's soccer. Sometimes that can happen. No, Canada went out, and in each game they had a clear, concise game plan. They executed it well. They kind of understood what the other teams would throw at them, the kind of the strengths and weaknesses. They obviously studied the tape on Honduras, the US, El Salvador. Obviously, in a round like this, you've played each of those teams once, so you have an idea of what they're going to throw at you. But they took the game film from all of their last games, studied it, analyzed it, and put together 3 concise game plans, and it allowed them to get 9 points. And it was beyond the expectations of anyone that they'd be able to do that. I mean, it's massive now. They're pretty much all but mathematically in the World Cup. Basically, the magic number is 2. Combination of points dropped or points gained by Canada or dropped by Panama. So it's basically a win, and they're in their last 3 games, which all but guarantees it at this point. It's beyond what anyone would have thought months ago. It's beyond what anyone would have thought days ago. It feels kind of surreal to think back that they did that, but it just kind of shows how good this team is, that they did it without their best player for all 3, and being shorthanded, going through suspensions and injuries. This Canadian team continues to impress with their depth, and obviously led by head coach John Herdman, how he's managing the roster. Feels like everyone's clicking right now, and it's made a big difference.
How much do we attest this, I guess, to character? I mean, you saw what the women's national team did and how they came together and they found a way to win. How much of that has sort of translated into the men's side, and then the compete levels there, the characters there, they're finding ways to win even when they don't look like the best team on the pitch. Like how, and without, like you said, without Alphonso Davies for this whole window, like how much do we focus on the character of this Canadian national team?
I think it plays a huge role for sure. I mean, you look at the talent on the team, it's, you can't doubt it. You look, it's probably the most talented Canadian men's national team roster we've ever seen. Even those who are on the 1986 team have admitted it. This is, far more talented of a team than they ever had back when they obviously the only time Canada made the World Cup. But, talent can only take you so far, especially in international soccer. It's not like club soccer where you're playing together week in, week out, 34 plus games. You kind of have time to gel. International soccer, you look at this final round, it's been a sprint. Even before the final round, you slip up once, it's over. Well, Canada, they've kind of had to go into some tough environments, play some tough games, and that's where their characters shine through. It's one thing to beat up teams that are, that you're better than, sorry. It's one thing to win games you should win, or even at home where you're controlling the elements, you're comfortable. I think the sign of Canada's character was their 2 away wins on this window, their first 2 away wins of this round. That takes character. Going into Honduras, Canada has a bad history there. They'd last won there over 30 years ago. You've got games like the famous 8-1 where, Canada obviously suffered, very humiliating defeat there back in 2012. So to go down there, short your best player and just play the game, you deal with the heat, the crowd, the travel, the fact that you might not have slept well the night before, fans are outside your hotel. You deal with all of those factors and go and win. And then you go do the same in El Salvador, which was even tougher than Honduras was. Very hostile atmosphere there. You're getting things thrown at you if you get too close to the sideline. That takes character. And that's the sort of thing that we've seen from this Canadian roster. For all the talent that they have, it seems cliche when they say it, we're a brotherhood. It's often something that's spouted, without base. For this team means it. You can tell that on the field they're running for each other. Every time they score, everyone celebrates like it's their own goal, because for them when Canada scores, it's a team thing. It's not an individual celebration. I think all of those factors have really allowed them to grab these sorts of results that they might not have been able to, just because they stick together, they're resilient, and then they go out and get the job done.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy going down to El Salvador and seeing a riot squad in each corner. It's kind of interesting in that situation. What's been the best part of actually covering this Canada historic run, really, because it's never been seen before?
It's a great question. I think for me, it's just been seeing the rise over a short time, because I've been able to cover the team since 2019. I covered my first game. It was Canada versus French Guiana at BC Place in Vancouver, Nations League qualifier. Bit of a far cry from the games we're seeing today. I mean, it was, remember Jonathan David scored in that game. So obviously he was just kind of kicking off his, compared to where he is at now. I think about 14 or 15 goals since I've seen him play in that game. Still a lot of big guns in that team, but obviously they were still gelling. They were still grinding their way through that. And Vancouver that night, Vancouver had 18,000 fans. So obviously it was a pretty good crowd for a game of that magnitude. But then I remember going later that year, I got to cover Canada versus Cuba in Toronto, and it was like 10,000. It was kind of, it was a fun game. Canada won 6-0. People who went had a good time, but no one really knew about it. It was just kind of like, I think even of a month later, they played the US. They won 2-0, kind of the game that everyone calls the turning point, the game where Canada started to realize, okay, we're not just an afterthought who beats up on minnows, but every time you play a big team, you lose 1-0 and you say, oh, we did so great, but we didn't ultimately win. That game they won. There's only like 15,000 fans in the stand. It was, again, a great atmosphere, a great time. People weren't really connected in this national team. And what I've noticed over the last year is how the interest has just skyrocketed. People want to watch the games. You see that in the TV numbers. People are showing up to the games. Having been to that game against Panama in Toronto, where it was 27,000, 30,000 people, it was loud. I was shocked at how loud it was just standing. I remember stepping outside for the national anthems, and you can almost hear, you feel your eardrums reverberate. And it's like, that's a feeling you haven't seen watching Canada ever. It was, that's feelings that you get watching other teams play. And then I go to Edmonton and it's 50,000 people. It's loud. And this game was just no exception at the latest home game in Hamilton. It was 12,000 officially. Sorry, it looked more like 16,000 if I'm going to be perfectly honest. There must have slipped some extra people, but it sounded loud. And for me, it's the interest of people going to games, but also you see it online. People on Twitter, on Instagram, they're all watching the games. You have casual fans talking about the games. I'll have my mom text me after the US game saying, "Oh, I saw that Canada won." It's just that sort of interest. Before, it kind of felt like it was just an echo chamber. You'd be with your friends like, "Oh, did you see the Canada versus Montserrat game yesterday?" or something like that. And everyone in your close circle would know, but not now. Everyone knows that it's popular. And for me, that's been the biggest thing to see how Canada's jumped on the mainstream like this. And that's been the most fun part to see.
Couple more questions before we let you go here, Alex. I want to talk about a couple of your articles that you've written recently for Destroy and Progress. You mentioned Atiba Hutchinson and how important he's been to the team, and you also talk about Milan Borjan, and that's the one I want to get into. All the little things that Borjan does has made him this like superstar in Canadian soccer that no one kind of expected. What has been the biggest thing for him, and how has he become this idol for the Canadian team?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a great question. I think he's obviously always been a great goalkeeper. I think he's entering. I think it's his 10th year with or 10th or 11th year with Canada. So he's obviously been around. He's seen some of the highs. He's seen some of the lows. He's always been a solid goalkeeper. But what you're really starting to see on this run is his leadership. You can see how he's really stepped up as a leader on the field. Obviously, his shot stopping's always been there. I think, in that piece, I go a lot more into the technical parts of his shot stopping. He's always been a really good shot stopper. Maybe not, his handling sometimes can ask the question of it, but in terms of his footwork, his shot stopping, he's always been a lead. He plays for Red Star Belgrade over in Europe. He's played against guys like Liverpool and Mo Salah. He's played against Neymar and PSG. He's played against some of the biggest stars. So it's not as if, he's playing at some obscure level and people don't know about him. People in Europe have heard of him before, but for Canada, he'd always come up big, but he hadn't had this big stage to shine on. But now I think we're really seeing that big game mentality that he's forged playing in some very hostile environments in Europe with, Red Star Belgrade. They have, if you ever get a chance to watch one of their home games in a non-COVID, reality, it is always so loud. They pack the place, and you've got flares coming out of nowhere. And you see that sort of big game mentality from Borjan in these hostile environments. He's fearless. He's been there before. And where that comes through is in his leadership. When Canada, they're a young team. Sometimes this is the first time they're facing things like this. They get jumpy, they get nervous. It's a big game. You want to go out, you want to impress, you want to, get the crowd going right away. Sometimes it isn't like that. You face some adversity, and that's where Borjan's really been a key piece. When Canada feels, it feels like they're getting a bit jumpy, he'll take the ball, he'll calm everything down, he'll get them together, he'll take a water break, or someone's down injured, he'll get up and tell someone, okay, let's calm it down, let's play our game. And if the game at the end it's 1-0 and Canada's starting to get a little bit too stressed with the ball and they're protecting a lead, he'll be the guy to kick the ball out of play, or do a little thing like he'll fake an injury or something, or he'll hurt his calf or something like that, and he'll milk it and be like, okay guys, let's take this time to breathe. Let's really, yes, there's going to be some added time, I've got this injury, but let's take our time. And it's those little things that he does that really helped the team in these big moments where before they might have gotten too excited by the occasion, or they might have folded and face of pressure. Borjan's kind of always that guy steadying the ship. Okay guys, let's find our game, and let's play how we can play, and let's not get overwhelmed, because we're a good team and let's play like it.
Great. Yeah. So you said the magic number is 2. Fingers crossed we get there. So if we get to the World Cup, can Canada compete with the bigger European nations or the bigger South American nations based on what you've seen since you've been following them since 2019?
I think that's a great question. I think it's going to definitely be tough against the big teams. I think they're definitely going to learn some lessons, but I think there's no reason why they can't compete. Obviously, in international soccer, you can only do, you're only able to go as far as your players can take you. The good thing is with Canada, they've got some pretty good players. You got a guy like Alphonso Davies. He's amongst the top at his position globally. He's one of the best players in Europe. You got a guy like Jonathan David. He's been, a top 5 forward in the world this year. You got 2 players like that. I think what we've, with that, you're always going to be able to compete. But what we've seen over this run is how good Canada's depth is, how the guys like your Stefan Eustachios, your Tajon Buchanans, your underrated performers like your Alistair Johnstons, who, your Sam Adekugbis, who have come out of nowhere in the eyes of many Canadians. A year or two ago, they might not have been key contributors as you are. You've got a guy like Milan Borjan holding down the fort and goal. Canada's got a lot of depth now, and I think because of that, they'll be able to at least compete. I mean, it's going to go. You go and play a France, for example. It's going to be hard to imagine anything other than a 1 or 2-0, a 3-0. France is a fantastic team. They're one of the best in the world. But the thing is, before, Canada would have gone into a game like that, held on for dear life, and anything less than a 3-0 would have been seen as a bonus. I think Canada can go out now and have the sense where they can play. And that doesn't mean they're going to go out and win 3-0 or win 1-0. They still might lose 3-0, but I don't think Canada will have an inferiority complex when they go, when or if, and knock on wood, when they go to the World Cup. It can't ever be too early to call it, even though it's pretty much all a mathematical certainty. But I think they won't have an inferiority complex if they play, and that's huge. I think that's the biggest thing we've noticed on this run. I think you look at their two biggest opponents they've played, Mexico and the US, too. You can talk about the uselessness or how vague the FIFA rankings are. The US and Mexico have flirted with being a top 10 team in the world over the last few years. To go and beat them convincingly each at home in one of the games you're missing your best player gives you an idea of Canada's gone, how their inferiority complex is gone. Before, it's you hold on tight, you pray for a 0-0. If you get a 1-0, it's lucky. If you're celebrating, no, this Canadian team won on merit. So I think heading in the World Cup, that's the biggest thing for me, where even if they get a tough group of 3 teams, they're going to play. They're going to try to play their game. And even if they go out and lose each of those games, they will have done so without fear. And that, I think that's going to be the biggest thing that allows them to maybe go on a run. Because when you play without fear, if everything aligns for you, get hot, then you can maybe go on a run to the round of 16, to the quarterfinals. And you realize, okay, that was fun. And let's do it again in 2026, of course.
Well, I think that's the biggest thing. I think everybody in Canada is wondering how far can this run go is really what it is. So we know Davies, we know Jonathan David and all that kind of stuff. Who's the next real budding star for this Canadian men's team? I
think that, there's a few candidates. I think one obviously is Tajon Buchanan. I think he's shown to kind of be that next guy up, because you kind of look at, the term that's kind of been thrown around is you're looking at Canada's big 5 right now. It's Alphonso Davies, Jonathan David, it's Tajon Buchanan, it's Kyle Larin, and Stephen Eustachio. I mean, you got to shut out Kyle Larin. He's been scoring for fun. He's up to 14 goals in this World Cup qualifying run, 5 in the final round, or 6, or no, I guess it's 5 now. He's been fantastic. But also Kyle Larin has been around for more than a half decade. He's 26 now. He's not exactly next up. This is more his time coming to pass. Stephen Eustachio, he's obviously newer to the program, only been here for a year and a bit since he really has been fully integrated in the program. He's still, he's 25. He's getting his moment in his prime. Tajon Buchanan, he's just 22. He only made his debut, not just for Canada, he made his debut for Canada back in June of last year. So it hasn't even been a full calendar year, but he made his debut for Canada at any level in March of last year at the Olympic qualifiers. A lot of these guys, they played for Canada at the U20, the U18 level. Like Alphonso Davies and Jonathan David have been playing together since they were U15s. They've been on a come up together, a rise, dating back to the youth programs. Tajon Buchanan came out of nowhere. He was playing in college. He obviously wasn't on the radar. He goes to New England. He lights everything on fire. Now he's playing for a massive club in Belgium, in Club Bruges. His rise has been so meteoric, where it's been wild to see what he's done in 6 months. He's already had his fair share of iconic moments for a guy, only how deep he is into his national career, which is not at all. He's already got that goal against Mexico at the Gold Cup. He's scored some clutch goals for Canada in this final round. He seems to be a big game player, a guy who steps up in the big moments. So he's definitely a guy I'm watching going forward, just because he doesn't have, he's burst onto the scene, and it just feels like he's meant for these big games. He's not, been, scared by it. I look at a guy like Sam Adekugbie as an example, because he's been fantastic on this run. Sam Adekugbe has been on the national team for over 5 years. This rise has been coming. It's taken a while. Tajon Buchanan has just blown the door off and stepped right in. And because of that, it feels like he has so much potential just because he's so early into it. Imagine what he can do when he adjusts, when he gets used to, when he's been playing for a few years now. So because of that, he really feels like the next guy up, at least of guys on this team. And then, as some will know, there are a lot of young guys coming up through the system that could play for Canada, that might play for Canada, that are going to play for Canada. But in terms of guys on the team, Tajon Buchanan is certainly on a great path.
Yeah, he's got to learn to stop taking guys down in the box. That's the biggest thing. So
between him and Richie, I'm always worried one of them is going to get a card every game. Oh,
It's
so
a ticking
stressful.
time bomb at times. That's the one thing.
Oh, I played against Richie and Kyle growing up, Kyle Laren, and Richie has always been that way, just ready to fight all the time. Like, will fight for his teammates though, like in a good way, but sometimes you just need to calm down in a match. Alex, thank you so much. We really appreciate you jumping on the show. We will definitely have you back during the next window, hopefully. And once Canada, well, if/when Canada clinches that World Cup spot, we'll have you on to celebrate and preview the World Cup, man. Thank you again.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
If you're looking to follow Alex, make sure you follow him on Twitter at Alexandre Gangué-Ruzic. You can follow him at Between the Sticks, and he is also the host of the Third Sub podcast. So check that out when you get a chance.